Hey, what's up with it, man? How y'all doing? Uh, Information equals destination. Wherever you want to go, wherever you end up at in life, it's the information that you are applying to your life or to your circumstances, to your situations that establishes and dictates your destination. So I've coined the term that information equals destination. That's our cliche for the book club. I want to get some merch done up that reflect and represent that. Just think about it. But yeah, it's information equals destination, because whatever information it is that that you are internalizing or being influenced by, that's what's going to contribute to your destination. With that being said, allow me to say I appreciate y'all for having patience with me as I develop this book club for the uncomfortable conversation. So I'm ironing out some wrinkles and some kinks and trying to implement some new strategies. With that being said, allow me to get into it, man. I got a book. I'm not going to tell you the name of it up front. I'm going to present some of the information to you, and then you can determine whether or not the information is useful. Once we know something is useful for us, or if we can see how something is useful for us, then it will create a desire for us to want that. So that's what I'm trying to do, create a desire for us to want this. And reading is a skill. See, a lot of us can read, but we struggle with the ability to comprehend what we read. So during the process of presenting this information for us, I want to also demonstrate how we can increase our comprehension skills. So let me get into it, and then I'm going to do my best to attempt to demonstrate some of what I'm talking about. I'll be brief because I got a few things to do. And in any event, I wanted to make this one of the important things that I had to do, that I needed to do. But just being straight up, it's hard to sit down and be still and read. With that being said, man, I appreciate y'all for tuning in, supporting me, trying to support us. Because, like I always say, this is a channel that's for us, from us. It's from us, for us, and it's by us, because can't nobody help us but us. We have the answers to our problems. We just neglect the responsibility to dig within ourselves and discover the solutions. So anyway, man, let's get into it. Information equals destination. Body language. That's what we're going to be talking about, body language. Body language is universal. Some of you will be taken aback by this statement, believing in your heart of hearts that it is actually a cultural phenomenon. Some of you can even point to a particular symbolic gesture specific to a group of people in order to prove that body language is cultural, and you know that, and you know what? You be right. But we simply aren't talking about body language on the same level. Culture transforms us every day, and it has an impact on our behavior. We are immersed in it, and we are its products. So all of our interactions are culture. But in this book, we will not be focusing on the cultural level. We go deeper than that. Oh, yeah, man, before I get too far into this, I gave somebody my word that I was going to do something. The beautician Joy, I think that's her name. Hey, I appreciate you for allowing the young lady to inform you about the book club, about the information that contributes to our destination. So thank you for tuning in and rocking with me, and I appreciate y'all for supporting me. All right. Universal body language was gradually established sometime between the emergence of bipedalism 7 million years ago, and of spoken language 35,000 years ago. This time period is so broad that the very substance of body language had time to become a major genetic component of human evolution. We are not asking if a person living in Manhattan makes the same gestures to communicate with children as someone who lives in a hut in New Guinea. If they are both human beings, it is through their common genetic makeup that began forming 7 million years ago, or 350 million years ago, when the modern human brain first developed, that they both acquired the necessary knowledge to recognize and understand each other. In fact, if they met each other today, they would be able to recognize and understand each other. Cultural components of human language, animal language. Cultural components of human language, animal language. The universality of body language is a prerequisite for our purposes. This work demonstrates it through illustration in every sense of the word. Practicality, it shows the body in action more than it theorizes about its universal character. Of course, these issues will be addressed, but let's take universality as an assumption for now, knowing that by the time you finish this book, you will fully accept that body language is universal. Body language expresses all of our emotions, those that we wish to keep to ourselves and those that we wish to transmit. From there, we extrapolate billions of different body postures, but they never stray from these 3 simple rules. Rule number 1, every emotion can be read on the face and the body. Every emotion can be read on the face and the body. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2, when we keep our emotions to ourselves, our hands have a tendency to wander over our faces and our bodies. Let me reread that again. Rule number 2, when we keep our emotions to ourselves, our hands have a tendency to wander over our faces and our bodies. Rule number 3, when we want to convey our emotions, our hands move toward the person to whom we are speaking. Body language will give movement to this book, which will describe as accurately as possible these 3 realities. Reality number 1, body language is a language of imprinted emotions. Number 2, body language is a language of repressed emotions. Imprinted, repressed. Number 3, body language is a language of expressed emotions. So there go 3 words for us: imprinted, repressed, and expressed. If you don't have an understanding of what those 3 words mean, you don't know what we're talking about. That's the interesting thing about reading, which is why a lot of people don't find it enjoyable, because it's kind of like, and I did this strategically, but a few minutes ago, I used a word called bipedalism. And if you don't know what that word means, none of what I just read in that first paragraph or 2 makes sense to you. Because if you don't understand the words, you can't grasp the concept. So when you read, you have to be patient. You have to take time to stop what you're doing. If you read a word that you don't know what it means, and go and get an understanding of that word, or else all your reading has been in vain. So allow me to help us help ourselves, because I know very few of us know what in the hell bipedalism means. And it's spelled bipedalism. Yeah, here it is. Bipedalism. There it is right there. I know few of us, can you see it? Right there, bipedalism. I know few of us really know what that means. And it was another word. I think it was extrapolate. Yeah, it was extrapolate right here. Extrapolate. Extrapolate. Man, these ain't common words, but this is why it's important to read, because when you reading for comprehension and understanding, it's one and the same. But when you reading to understand what you're reading, opposed to just reading to be entertained by what you're reading, you're gonna have to take time and increase your vocabulary. And this is how reading develops us, because when you increase your wordplay, it's gonna affect your thoughts. That's why it's important to have a strong vocabulary, because the more words you know, the more those words can ignite thought, if that makes sense. But if it don't worry about it. We'll get to it at some point throughout our reading chapters and engagements. But anyway, bipedalism, it basically just means the ability to walk on two legs. Bi, a prefix meaning two, pedalism. So if you really use your common sense, we're a lot smarter than we really know ourselves to be, but we have to be aware of what we know. So bipedalism is the ability to walk on two legs. And extrapolate is extending the application of a method or conclusion to an unknown situation by assuming that existing trends will continue, or simpler exist. Basically, it's just saying that, okay, existing trends will continue. Methods will be applicable. That similar methods will be applicable. It's basically just assuming something, but words that you can substitute this word with. There's like synonyms, antonyms, I forgot which one, but that's why it's important to remember the basics. But words that are in association to extrapolate is anticipate, assume, conclude, envision, or figure. So with that being said, just for the sake of time, I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing what needs to be done. Some of this stuff you have to do. Some of the stuff that contributes to you being a better person, you have to work at it to do it so you can become it. I'm just presenting it and trying to provide an understanding. Now you have to be motivated to go and do the true work that needs to be done. So let me get on. All right, emotion. Everyone knows what it is until the moment they are asked to define it. So I ask you, define what an emotion is to you, based off of your understanding in life. What is an emotion? I'm gonna wait. All right, let's go ahead. But that's not an answer for me. It's an answer for you. Just be aware of it for yourself. When I say that I am angry, I might be, but I could also be mistaken. In fact, I might be scared, jealous, or both at the same time. Outside observers are more qualified to judge my mood than I myself am. Body language, a language of emotions. Emotions hold a fundamental place in our lives as human beings. They are at the root of our decisions, yet they are paradoxically largely ignored by mainstream science. This is all the more astonishing because they have an unequaled advantage in the world of human sciences. They can be seen. Emotions are concrete and can be measured and recorded. They are expressed by the human body and transform it. That is why we call it body language. However, the academic community often prefers the expression nonverbal language, which is more sterile. In reality, these two expressions clarify each other, one embedded in the other, thereby contributing to the better reading of the body. You said nonverbal language? Body language is not an invention of the mind. More than 80% of our exchanges pass through channels other than words. There is no serious or even fanciful doubt about this. But astonishingly, no rigorous investigation has found, even today, a way to classify nonverbal human exchange. Nonverbal language is enigmatic. So that's two words that's been used in that paragraph. Enigmatic and paradoxal. I don't remember what paradoxal was, but do your research, and it resonates different when you understand what those words mean. A true gap in our knowledge, almost as if it didn't exist. You don't agree? Take a classic academic definition from any common French dictionary, like Larousse or Robert, while looking for the antonym of the word verbal. You might think you would find an expression similar to nonverbal. Well, you would have wasted your time and money. The words non and verbal are not associated in these conventional dictionaries. Nonverbal does not come up as the antonym of verbal, like non-combatant might for combatant. For example, the antonym of the word verbal is the word written. The expression nonverbal is conspicuous in its absence. That's another word, conspicuous. Nonverbal language is essential at every stage of life. At birth, a doctor who leans over a newborn to observe it is looking for information that is nonverbal. For example, he checks skin color, which turns pink the moment the newborn's lungs fill up with air for the first time. Vital signs, which inform him of the newborn's state of health, etc. Later, in school, what do we most often rely on when we say that a child looks intelligent? In another vein, how do lovers choose each other, if not for the most part using criteria that are almost totally nonverbal? And for job interviews, don't men shave and don't women put on makeup? They know that first impressions are nonverbal and that it takes an enormous amount of time to dispel them. At every stage of life, we use nonverbal information from our environment to adapt in order to communicate more effectively. Some people are unable to decipher nonverbal language. They are, in fact, incapable of deciphering other people's facial or body expressions in conversation. This difficulty in understanding other people can become a real problem and has a name: Asperger's syndrome. I never heard of it. Asperger's syndrome, but it means having difficulty in understanding other people and reading their emotions or something like. Let me see. Some people are unable to decipher nonverbal language. They are, in fact, incapable of deciphering other people's facial or body expressions. Okay, having the inability to decipher other people's facial and body expressions. This difficulty in understanding other people can become a real problem and has a name. It's called Asperger's syndrome. So people who have it feel handicapped. They feel their own emotions, but are often incapable of recognizing those of the people around them. And their inability to decipher the unspoken greatly reduces their performance in relationships. Put yourselves in their place. Imagine that you approach one of your friends and you are laughing because you have just gotten some good news, while he is despondent because he has received some bad news. You risk passing for someone who is inhumane if you persist in joking around instead of appearing affected, because you fail to perceive his state of mind. It is nonverbal language that permits us to not make this mistake and to adapt the way we communicate. Body language expresses emotions, the unspoken, so well that human beings are generally more skillful at deciphering video footage of lies that have been uttered by individuals if they look at it. If they look at images that have been muted rather than if they listen to what is being said. One of the things that IQ tests calculate is nonverbal aptitude. Excuse me. But this test is limited to the person's ability to manipulate three-dimensional space. Nowhere is the form of intelligence which is so precise that it allows, for example, someone to negotiate skillfully or gain the good graces of others by understanding what they feel. Taking into account, companies that hire new employees do not measure their capacity either, even if they ask them to demonstrate active listening. All occupations in the employees must be capable. All occupations in the service sector are techno-commercial today. Technical and commercial. Employees must be capable of resolving problems and selling their solutions to internal and external clients. It is in doing this that we must take the capacity to read emotions into consideration. The Rosenthal rats and the Figmalian effect. Boy, they come up with some stuff in this book. But one thing about it, it's going to expose you to some new terminology. I'm just going to read this last page, and then let me see. Actually, this will be, I got about a page and a half, so I'm going to go on and read that, because that'll finish up chapter 1. Okay. The importance of body language is not exploited, or just barely so. However, its true impact on everyday communication has been measured scrupulously by Robert Rosenthal, an American researcher whose work we cannot overlook. In concrete terms, he explained to his students that he had selected 2 populations of rats for the purposes of an experiment: common rats and others from a line of superior intelligence. In reality, the rats were cerebrally identical. He asked the students to lead the animals through a maze. The inevitable happened. Those that were designated as more intelligent succeeded in crossing the labyrinth faster than the others. Rosenthal, anxious to understand, began more toughly observing. Not the rats, of course, but the students. He saw that they were more attentive, more empathetic, and more affectionate with the animals that were said to be more intelligent. That's interesting. And in fact, that the most pampered rats were also the most calm, guided by the unconscious attention from the experimenters. They did better, as they were animals. It was not a question of an attitude that had been affected by the students' vocabulary. The entire success of the brighter rats had to be attributed to the impact of nonverbal communication. Obviously, Rosenthal did not stop there. He pursued his experiment on humans. This time, at the beginning of the school year, he spoke to some professors about a certain number of students whose tests had supposedly revealed more intelligence. He proposed that they meet again at the end of the year to measure the evolution of their students. As you have already guessed, these students were neither more nor less intelligent than the others, but at the end of the school year, they had better than average results, some ranking extremely high. Rosenthal spoke on this occasion of a Figmalian effect. You call someone who knows how to encourage the full potential of another person by projecting success, or for that matter, failure, which is less often evoked, a Figmalian. The phenomenon that causes this effect is mostly nonverbal. The 5 dimensions of nonverbal language. The expression nonverbal language designating everything that is not verbal needs to be clarified. In fact, the human brain recognizes when communication. The human brain recognizes when communicating 5 different forms of nonverbal information that are handled by different cerebral zones. The human brain recognizes when communicating 5 different forms of nonverbal information that are handled by different cerebral zones. Body language is one of them. It is important to briefly distinguish them here in order not to have to come back later, and to focus on carefully considering the messages of body language. When you talk with someone, he will do himself at a certain distance. When you talk with someone, he will hold himself at a certain distance from you. He will speak and send subliminal messages, but also conscious ones, both through specific body language. That distance is the perceivable dimension. It's the distance at which a person communicates with you. The space and time at the heart of communication. It influences how we relate to each other. You will communicate differently depending on whether you are near or far from the person to whom you are speaking, next to him or across from him, if you are in a hurry or not. The voice has a paraverbal dimension. Paraverbal. Paraverbal. The first one was periverbal. Periverbal. So now we at paraverbal dimension. The paraverbal dimension. So I'm going to come back and break this down because they just basically saying that it's 5 different categories of this dimension, the 5 dimensions of nonverbal language. Number 1 is periverbal. Number 2 is paraverbal. It affects communication beyond a specific tone that everyone understands that it was actually inedible. This dimension is not directly of interest to our discussion of body language. The subliminal infraverbal information also unconsciously transforms communication. These are the smells, the colors, and the shapes of clothing, among others. That's the infraverbal. The infraverbal is information also unconsciously transforms communication. These are the smells, the colors, and the shapes of clothing, among others. The distinctive subverbal signs are deciphered consciously. Clothing, rings, and watches, for example, are identified in another part of the brain and also contribute to nonverbal communication. But body language is something else. We must not forget the preverbal dimension. Before speaking in an exchange, one part of the brain unconsciously adopts the body posture of the other person. It is thanks to this mechanism that we naturally experience empathy and adapt ourselves to that person. The discovery of the existence of the cerebral zone responsible for this phenomenon in the left cortex dates to less than 15 years ago. It establishes that body language is all-powerful by demonstrating that a human being is armed with a device that permits him to understand another simply by looking at him. To read the body language of another is to decipher his emotions. That's interesting. I'm going to read that again. The discovery of the existence of the cerebral zone responsible for this phenomenon in the left cortex dates to less than 15 years ago. It establishes that body language is all-powerful by demonstrating that a human being is armed with a device that permits him to understand another's simply by looking at him. To read the body language of another is to decipher his emotions. Nonverbal language consists of 5 dimensions. Periverbal, the connection between time and space. Paraverbal, paraverbal, the different modulations of the voice. Infraverbal, subliminal conscious realities. Supraverbal, the conscious signs, clothing, and etc. And preverbal, which is body language. Body language corresponds to the trace left by the emotions on the physical frame. Body language corresponds to the trace left by emotions on the physical frame. Body language reveals emotional states. I'm going to show that to y'all right quick, just in case it's actually some people that be in here that be following along. But those are the 5 different dimensions that we was just talking about. And then that pretty much concludes chapter 1. It's going to take us to chapter 2, which is called What is an Emotion? Chapter 2. So, hey man, I done spent 30 minutes of my morning. I got to get going. What is an emotion? I'm just going to read the first page of that so we'll know what we're getting into. What is an emotion? Chapter 2. Our civilization is at the point of being turned upside down by several discoveries whose repercussions could very well transform even our most everyday thoughts. It was not very long ago that we still believed, for example, that emotions prevented us from keeping a cool head and that emotional outbursts prevented human beings from taking reasonable action. We now know that emotions are not the animal spirits that were spoken of long ago. Since Charles Darwin's time, specialists have all agreed that fear, anger, joy, and sadness are universal emotions. But that was about the only real agreement between all the schools of thought until the 90s, at least with regard to emotions. A new and recent interest has arisen as a result of major discoveries that fall under the term emotional intelligence. First, Joseph Ledoux identified an area of the brain that stores emotional experiences and can sometimes react before even having understood a danger. The amygdala. Okay, that's a word I'm gonna look up. I'll have to come back and give y'all the definition of that. The amygdala, amygdala. This was a bombshell, the first breach of the theories of reason that excluded emotions. We also discovered that the neocortex, the conscious brain that appeared relatively recently in the history of our species, is not always necessary for making intelligent decisions. At about the same time, Antonio, assisted by his research team at the University of Iowa, made another discovery. He showed that people in whom certain emotional areas are destroyed are incapable of making sound decisions simply because they are no longer able to sense what is really important. These two researchers gave emotions their rightful place. They showed that emotions are responsible for accurately making the most complicated decisions. Emotions allow us in good conscience to distinguish between what is important and what is less so. Without them, it is even impossible to be reasonable. Emotion was inducted into the palace of reason, of which she became the queen. We are at the dawn of a revolution whose themes are still being debated in the insider circle, but which is preparing to overturn the 21st century of what we can be certain. So anyway, a lot of this stuff is interesting reading because it's kind of it's new terminology, and if you don't understand the terminology, you in trouble as it relates to anything. With that being said, man, we just trying to acquire more information so that we can take control of our destination, because information does dictate our destination. Information equals your destination. With that being said, man, peace out. I appreciate y'all for tuning in and trying to have the patience to endure my attempts of better equipping us with righteous information. I apologize for hacking and coughing, but I'm just getting over a cold from the weekend. Not a cold, but some type of something. It ain't a cold. Maybe it is a cold. I just didn't experience all the fevers, chills, and all of that. But nevertheless, I got a cough. And in any event, with or without the cough, I'm trying to give us something that we can use to take control of our present so that we can control our future. Peace out, man. Thank y'all for rocking with me.